Senator Adams, Senator Escamilla is here.
There we go.
Big crowd today.
Get back up there.
We're ready whenever you are.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Utah Senate. This is our time to be available to the public and to the media. We take questions. For those who are watching over the internet, we invite your questions and we'll attempt to answer them. If we don't get to every question today, we will try and answer it tomorrow. That's to encourage your constant and continual watching our press availability. So first of all, we got Senator Escamilla here representing our minority party, and Senator Adams, our majority whip, and I'm Senate President Wayne Niederhauser. Questions from the media?
I'd like to get your thoughts on the school shooting in Florida, and in addition to that, y'all's thoughts on what can government do to keep kids safe at school. You obviously had the vote today on Senator Weiler's bill, but any other thoughts beyond that?
Well, it's a horrible situation. We've had a few of these situations over the last year, and we had the Chinese student at the University of Utah who was killed maliciously, I think, and those are grave situations, and our hearts go out to the families and to the people in Florida.
You know, everyone that has, I think as a parent, that's the scariest thing that, could potentially happen. And mental health, I think there's a lot of bills that we're addressing with mental health and our crisis intervention, having people trained. Senator Thatcher is running that bill to be able to license individuals so they can do those first-time responders and be able to help. And this is tough because many of these individuals have planned this ahead, and they have access to a lot of ammo. And so I think it's a conversation for Congress to continue to have conversations on some issues, but statewide I think we need to be more proactive on mental health illness and how we are providing support and resources for everyone. Because at the end of the day, this is a community issue. It's not an isolated issue for the person that has a mental health problem.
And I think we'll all want to know more as as time goes by. We'd like to, I think, know why, how, or more information. But right now, I think we all are just really kind of sick and concerned and about the families. I can't think of anything more traumatic for a parent than to send your kids away for school that morning and then find out that they weren't coming home. It's a sad day, a sad period of time, and a sad event.
What about action on gun control as a result of this? It keeps coming up, and yet nothing seems to happen. What needs to be done at this point?
Well, we'd be entertaining proposals. I just don't know, short of an outlaw of all guns, you're going to be faced with somebody that has the ability to have a weapon, and that's a Second Amendment right. So probably the focus should be more towards trying to solve some of the mental illness issues that we have.
There's a question, and again, with no details, because I'm by no way, I've just seen some of the stuff in the media, and I feel ill-prepared to speak on the specific case, but I think there's an issue related, and there's talk about maybe if you start having Congress look into specific type of assault rifles, and I'm not an expert on guns, so it's hard for me to speak on that issue, but I think there should be consideration of all of those issues, and also security inside schools. I've heard a lot of parents from a Spanish radio station from Florida that their children attend the school, and I was listening to some of their concerns that have been raised at their local school district with regards to 3,000 kids. It's like a very large high school, my understanding is, and having only X number of security guards available, and actually teachers playing that role as well. So again, with limited information, it's hard, but it is an issue of mental health, it's an issue of security, it's an issue of bullying, if there were bullying, there's so many other factors. And also, my understanding is there was, an assault rifle utilized, and I'm not an expert on guns, so it makes it hard for me to have that much of a feedback, but any proposals, I think, are important because we're seeing more of this type of cases. They're not that isolated anymore.
It could be a semi-automatic shotgun. All those are, but the difficulty, I think, or the focus of at least the attention ought to be to try and prevent someone that
That's probably.
has a mental situation to, and then, of course, security at our schools is paramount.
The situation's tragic, and no matter what the choice of the weapon, it seems like automobiles have become the weapon of choice in some instances as you see these things happen, and we're dealing with issues, and it seems like if somebody wants to do harm, it's as has been mentioned, it seems like they may find a way to do it, whether it's through whatever device they choose. Again, I think we need to try to focus on what is going on in people's minds and how we can help, and whether there's a way to reach out before these instances happen. And whoever does them are definitely troubled. They're personally and individually challenged, and there's got to be people around them that are at least experiencing that with them, and whether we train and do a better job of awareness for all of us to pay attention to those whom we know and love and are concerned about, to be aware of these events that may be going on inside of their mind or their lives that cause them to do horribly damaging things. And we can focus on the weapon, and I suppose that's one thing that we can look at, but that has been mentioned. I think people will find weapons. It's pretty hard, whether it's whatever tool it is, to stop people from acting out if you don't deal with the issue at the core. So,
can you talk about joint leadership's meeting with the governor today, what you discussed? And also, as part of that, there are several bills out there that kind of push back against the governor, it seems, issues, threatening any veto.
Senator Adams, you were chairing the meeting.
I don't think there's ever been we haven't heard threats of vetoes yet. We heard on the floor Senator Weiler talk about the resolutions, or the joint concurrent resolutions, but I think the governor, like always, would like to have some dialogue and discussion, and I don't see this year as much different than the previous years. So there's probably bills that he's more supportive of than others, and if we find some that he's not supportive of, it's probably a good idea to have a dialogue.
Has he been talking about these pushback bills at all?
He didn't talk about it today.
He didn't today in our meeting.
We talked mainly about, we had a little discussion on .05 DUI.
Public lands. No, he wasn't there for the public lands, but I think we talked about the task force.
And then just different election bills that are out there. We talked about where we're headed with elections.
What did you talk about on .05?
Just what possible policy changes might be coming up.
And
What are
what
those?
possible changes are those?
Senator Adams mentioned a couple that are potentially coming from.
The novice driver,
Reps.
I think, probably needs to be fixed in the bill, and perhaps some of the gun-related issues with alcohol, I think those probably need to be fixed. I think Senator Thurston just released a bill, and I'm not sure whether it has validity to it or not, but on a first-time offense, to allow for a provisional license if there were ignition locks, in order to have people who have first-time offenses. He told me there's some lack of support, or maybe even opposition to that. So, but those were the three that I think at least I'm aware of.
Any discussion of a tiered system yet?
No, I don't think so. There was, in fact, we ought to maybe get Senator Buxton in here. He actually came into our leadership meeting and reported. You may have followed it last year when they had the demo, and they actually had volunteers that decided they would drink alcohol and see how their impairment went. And I think the consensus was that at .05 there was impairment, and he talked about at least their interim study and how convinced he was that a .05 is a good number.
So not likely to run any kind of legislation this year dealing with a tiered system or?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any.
I don't know if you guys have noticed lately, but Speaker Hughes has been on a marathon for House Bill 241. It's the non-compete prohibition, which
Oh,
would
yeah.
affect folks such as ourselves.
Is that a bill this year?
Yeah. But it's really generating a lot of buzz with local community writers, and as I mentioned, the speaker's been nonstop the last 2 days on Twitter. Interesting to hear your guys' thoughts on so far, who you've been approached by, what the discussions have been, and how you're leaning toward that.
Have you talked about it in
Nope.
your body at all?
Not at all.
Most of the time, we don't
We just
really
wait
talk too
until
much
the-
about that specifically, so it's really hard for me to talk at length until the bill actually gets here, because we're not sure if it gets here, and what form it is when it does. And we understand it's focused on the media, or our media outlets, and trying to get rid of goodwill. And I've seen some confidential communications from people in the media who really love what the speaker is doing. And then I've also heard from the owners of these media outlets that they hate the bill. And we'll try to be balancing that issue as it comes over to the Senate. And I don't know what the outcome of that will be at this point.
Actually, Representative Schultz, I think it's his bill. The Speaker obviously is supportive of it. Went to an event yesterday. I think the media, Desert Media hosted it, but I think there was a group there, at least, that we listened to. It'll be an issue that I think you can look at both sides, and at the end of the day, you'll have to make a determination as to what's fair. I know a lot in the business community are really, I think when we went to a year, and what was that, a couple of years ago when we had that bill? It wasn't last year, was
2
it?
years.
2
2
years
years
ago.
ago. I think that was a very good, at least a good move. We've heard from a lot of people that the 1 year seems to be reasonable and workable. But on the other hand, there seems to be a challenge, especially the challenge for the individual is when they can't work. If they decide to leave and they just can't, and I remember 2 years ago hearing testimony in committee when I heard it, of individuals who actually left their employment and were without work for a year or two, and that becomes a little challenging. And so I think there needs to be a balance of how to make transitions and not be, again, respect the desires of contract law and the ability for people to negotiate, but also I think it's really concerning when people can't provide for their families, and that seems to be a very emotional issue too.
At this point, do you find either of the arguments more persuasive than the other?
I don't at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to see it come out of the House in what form.
I've heard of some potential amendments over there, tiering it somehow to income and so forth, and so it's really difficult to comment until we see what really comes from the House.
Mitt Romney apparently is calling lawmakers to let them know and this will come as a surprise, he may be running for Senate.
Oh, I thought we weren't going to have anybody run for Senate this year.
I want to know, did he call anyone here, and what was the conversation about?
Didn't call you?
Yeah, I don't think he has
I got
anyone in our caucus.
I got a call this morning. I was presenting the bill, didn't take the call. He left a message. Just said that he was contemplating doing that and wanted to reach out and talk to lawmakers. So it's on my voicemail. It's a
Checking.
nice call. But
So-
I didn't talk to him.
What did he say in the voicemail?
He just said that he wanted to postpone it given the event and his announcement, and wanted to reach out to lawmakers and get their opinions of what he might do if he were eventually elected. So again, I was impressed with the fact that he was reaching out for my input, which I probably listened more to than anything else in the message, and look forward to giving him input, because I think I've got a list that the federal government could do.
So basically what he might do if he were elected
Yeah.
is,
That's what he asked for, and things that were concerning to the state, trying to understand our issues. And again, I think we've got the interaction between the state and the federal government will not end, and hopefully, especially in my district with Hill Air Force Base and the things we're doing with the enhanced use lease and what Lockheed, ATK, and the defense contractors and the composite mode. Senator Hatch has been very, very helpful to Utah, I think, and we need someone who will follow up and hopefully be as effective and helpful.
Any response to the criticism that Rob Anderson had against Mitt Romney yesterday?
We kind of addressed that yesterday. We were kind of surprised, but when you think about it, if you're running for Senate, wouldn't you want to be out working on it now, or even 2 months ago? Usually if somebody's really serious about running, they make an announcement. And so I think we're a little all perplexed, and maybe the phone call, and I've got a voice message here that I haven't answered, looks like from an unfamiliar, maybe called me today too, I don't know. But,
Is it a Massachusetts area code?
no, it isn't, actually.
You want me to share numbers and see if it's the same?
It's an 801 number, it's just not a familiar number. But.
I'm trying to.
There has been talk that Mitt Romney isn't tied closely enough to Utah to do a good job of representing the state. I think that's what Rob Anderson was getting at, and also sharing concerns that have been raised by others. Is this effort to reach out to lawmakers and attempt to maybe counter that?
Personally, I don't buy that argument. I just don't buy that argument. Although probably grew up in Michigan, spent a lot of time in Massachusetts, has had deep ties to Utah all his life.
He did a really good job for Utah during the Olympics. If anybody remembers back, and we're thinking of doing them again, but that period of time perhaps is lost on a lot of people, but it's for those that walked through it. 9/11 happened just months before the Olympics, and we followed up with the scandal, and he came in. Generally speaking, Olympics are not an economic success. And if anybody understands his capacity, we ought to understand it in Utah. He took an Olympic that there were a lot of people in the world that did not want to travel after 9/11. We were all very, very concerned. It was a very traumatic time for all of us in our country and around the world. And the attendance was down. And he not only made the Olympics a great success, but he made them a financial success. We still have a trust account, a reserve fund, whatever you want to call it, that's paying for those venues and has maintained them. Our citizens have enjoyed that for years, and it actually is what put us in, I think, in contention and in place for the new Olympics. And someone that has that economic sense of not spending more than you make, actually saving some money, actually looking for trying to maintain infrastructure. Those are issues that are big to Utah, and he's shown us how he could do it. And I actually think that he'd be a heck of a candidate. So,
but it just goes far deeper than the Olympics. His ties, family ties, for many, many years, right from his birth. So. Questions from our viewers?
Not today.
None.
Senator
All right, one
Smith,
more question then.
Did you want to address Romney at all? I mean, Democrats do have a candidate in this race.
Yes,
but-
well, there's two.
Yeah.
And I'm a supporter of Jenny Wilson, so I think she's qualified as being a public servant in the state of Utah for many years, and I'm excited to see if it's a Wilson-Romney race. I think Jenny not only has been in Utah and lived her entire life here, and did some work in D.C. She did work for a congressman, but we think we have it will be with her a great candidate to push and put our agenda forward and have hopefully some checks and balances as well. So we're excited for whoever's going to jump from the Republican side, and we know statewide races are hard for Democrats, and I have some small experience running for Congress, and those are tough races, but Jenny's great and she has a lot of support from DC. And, you know, I think that's important, and she's a woman too, so that makes it even better.
What about the issue of how long Mitt has lived in Utah, what his ties are? I know Councilwoman Wilson's raised that already.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's, at the end of the day, I think constituents and people that are voting you know, will see the whole thing, and, you know, that if you're, I mean, the whole idea of whether it was a Massachusetts number or not, I mean, you know, what was on his profile on Twitter, I mean, I think, you know, the constituents.
Probably
will
my
vote.
mother, and I just can't recognize
It's
it.
terrible. No, I think constituents are, you know, we sometimes I think people may underestimate constituents, and I see, you know, they can see through, and, you know, honesty, and if people think he's, you know, a good candidate, he'll do what he has to do, but I also feel that constituents in Utah also may want some different type of representation.
In the United States, you have to get elected.
Yes.
You just don't announce you're
Yeah, that's
running
true.
for office and you're in office.
There's a
You have to be
process.
elected. And it's a good process.
And I would expect there'd be contenders.
In my 2006 election, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life times 10. And
Yeah,
the
your
process
first
of getting elected, being in debates, facing the public, meeting the people, is a very defining and refining process. And it is part of actually establishing policy. Because through that process, you refine your platform and what the people want and how you need to represent them.
We've heard the auditor, Dougal, may run. I talked about this yesterday, but I'm wondering what others think of that. Sounds like Senator Adams, you're a Romney supporter.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that Auditor Dougal might run. I served in the House with him, and he would be a viable candidate. He's a great person, and he's done a great job as the auditor, so.
Given
But you're
that-
still a Romney guy?
Right now, yes, until I hear who's running, so, but I think Romney would surely be the front runner.
When I'm running for office, I'd love to have no opposition. But that's not the way our system works, and it's good to have choice. It's good that our voters have choices. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.